Maria Mitchell was a very early woman in the field of astronomy. In fact, she was the first female astronomer in the United States, and she was also the first American scientist to discover a comet. It's this discovery that she's possibly most remembered for, but she had so many other accomplishments throughout her life. Mitchell was more than just an astronomer, too. She was also a librarian, a naturalist, and an educator. She acted as an early advocate for science and math education for girls. She was involved in a lot of social activism, including the anti-slavery and suffrage movements. Mitchell was born on August 1st, 1818, on the island of Nantucket in Massachusetts. She was the third of 10 children, and her parents were William and Lydia Mitchell. Her parents were Quakers, so they advocated for equal education for boys and girls. Mitchell's father was an astronomer and a teacher, and it was from him that her love of astronomy was born. He let her assist in his work of rating chronometers for the Nantucket whaling fleet, and he also encouraged her independent use of his telescope. When Mitchell was just 12 years old, she helped her father calculate the position of their home when observing a solar eclipse. By the time she was 14, she was trusted by ship captains to rate their chronometers for long whaling journeys. She had a strong interest in mathematics and the sky from an early age, which is pretty important for anyone who wants to get into astronomy. In 1836, Mitchell began working as a librarian for the Nantucket Athenaeum. She remained in that position for 2 entire decades. During the day, she did her duties as a librarian, often acting as an informal teacher in the process. And at night, she would observe the skies. She used the observatory that her father built on top of the nearby Pacific Bank. That was his workplace, where he was the principal officer and the head cashier. And it was through this very observatory that she would make an important discovery. On October 1st, 1847, Mitchell was sweeping the skies with a 2-inch telescope. During this survey, she happened to notice a small, blurry object that she didn't recognize. It didn't appear anywhere on her charts, which led to a realization. She had just discovered a comet. This discovery was huge for Mitchell. For her discovery, King Frederick VI of Denmark awarded her a gold medal, and she was thrust into international fame among scientific circles. This was what led to her becoming America's first professional female astronomer. After achieving fame, Mitchell was widely sought after, and she went on to many noble accomplishments. Her comet became known as Miss Mitchell's Comet, and it is now formally designated as C/1847 T1 Mitchell. The year after she discovered it, she became the first woman elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Later on, she was also elected to the American Association for the Advancement of Science, as well as the American Philosophical Society. She also held a position as a computer for the Ephemeris of Venus for the U.S. Nautical Almanac, which very well might have made her the first woman to work for the United States federal government. And in case you don't know what an ephemeris is, it's a table of calculated positions for an astronomical object. It basically tells you where something will be at a specific time. So one of Mitchell's many positions throughout her life was to make one of those for Venus. In 1856, Mitchell resigned from her decades-long post at the Nantucket Athenaeum. She traveled throughout the US and Europe, meeting many other scientists and astronomers along the way and becoming involved in the anti-slavery and suffrage movements. Subsequently, feminists were the ones keeping Mitchell's accomplishments in the public eye. This was a time when women were still struggling to make any sort of ground in scientific fields, so it was a huge achievement for Mitchell to become the first female professional astronomer. She was an excellent role model and example for other women and girls who were interested in math and science. Mitchell eventually completed her travels, and in 1961 she moved to Lynn, Massachusetts with her widowed father. In 1865, after the American Civil War, a man by the name of Matthew Vassar founded the Vassar Female College, which later became just Vassar College. He reached out to Mitchell, who he wanted as the professor of astronomy at his new school. She was reluctant, but with her father's encouragement, she joined the school's faculty. At Vassar College, Mitchell had access to a 12-inch telescope, which was the third largest in the United States at the time. She began to specialize in the surfaces and satellites of Jupiter and Saturn. As the director of the observatory and the the professor of astronomy, in the early days, she was the most prominent member of the college's faculty. Mitchell defied social conventions by having her female students come out at night for classwork and celestial observations. She also brought noted feminists to her observatory to speak on political issues. She always wanted to make sure that her female students knew they were just as capable of achieving great things as their male counterparts. The research Mitchell conducted, as well as that of her students, was frequently published in academic journals that traditionally only featured men. 3 of her students were later included in the first list of academic men of science in 1906. Mitchell was a great inspiration to her students, and she felt that Vassar College was truly her home. She often used her position to advocate for women in science. She was a leader in the formation of the American Association for the Advancement of Women and served as its 1873 president. She was also elected vice president of the American Social Science Association, which was one of very few mixed-gender professional associations of the era. In 1876, the year of the United States' 100th birthday, she gave an important speech titled "The Need for Women in Science." Mitchell was also a pioneer in the daily photography of sunspots. She was the first to discover that they were actually whirling vertical cavities instead of clouds, which was what had been believed earlier. She also studied comets, nebulae, double stars, and solar eclipses. Mitchell was beloved by her students, and she taught them until she had to retire in 1888 because of failing health. She continued her research in Lynn, Massachusetts, where her sister lived. Then on June 28, 1889, Maria Mitchell passed away at the age of 70. She was buried next to her parents in their family's plot at the Prospect Hill Cemetery on Nantucket. Several of Mitchell's students later testified to the great influence she had as both a teacher and an example. Her students really looked up to her, and she always did the best she could to support them. Mitchell's friends and supporters founded the Maria Mitchell Association on Nantucket in 1902, and this organization still exists today. They preserved her home, which is open to visitors, and they work to keep her legacy and accomplishments alive. Mitchell was one of 3 women elected to the Hall of Fame of Great Americans in 1905, and she was also an inductee into the National Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls, New York. Later, astronomers honored her by giving the name of Mitchell to a crater on the moon. As the first female astronomer in the United States, Maria Mitchell made groundbreaking progress in paving the way for other women to follow in her footsteps. Even now, well over a century after her death, I'm sure she's still an inspiration to many. I hope you enjoyed this little exploration of Maria Mitchell and her accomplishments. This was my 3rd and final video for Women's History Month, focusing on women in astronomy. My other 2 videos are about Carolyn Shoemaker and Cecilia Payne, so if you enjoyed this one, you'll probably like those ones too. Thank you very much for watching this video. I would appreciate it if you could leave a like, and of course you can subscribe if you ever want to see more. But with all that said and done, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time.